Welcome back to this very special conversation with Peter Jesperson, Side 2, as I like to call it. To recap where we've been, Peter is born and raised in the Minneapolis area in the 1950s. He discovers at the age of 4.5 that he has an unusually strong connection to music. It makes him feel something deeper than most, and as he said, almost frightening. His passion for music brings him to start collecting albums, and he spends a lot of time at the local record shops. He gets one foot in the music business door when his father helps Peter get him his first job distributing the European music magazine New Music Express. He gets another foot in the door when he gets a coveted job at Orfolk Jokopus Records in Minneapolis. His taste in music is becoming well known in town, and Peter starts to DJ at Jay's Longhorn, spinning his own records which he hauls back and forth to the club nearly 7 nights a week. He is influencing the taste of the Minneapolis music scene. And to take one giant step further, he then starts a record company with Paul Stark and Charlie Hallman. They call it Twin Tone Records, and Peter is in charge of finding the artists. One day, a 20-year-old Paul Westerberg approaches Peter with a Maxell C90 cassette, with one side of the cassette labeled in lovely handwriting, Santana, Welcome, Moonflower. The other side of the cassette, in not-so-lovely handwriting, has the word Replacements and 4 song titles. Peter listens, and just seconds into the first song, Raised in the City, he's hooked. He contacts Paul Westerberg, they sign the band, or famously, not sign, and Peter becomes the band's manager, both in the studio and on the road. When we left side 1 of this conversation, the Replacements are in the studio recording what many fans argue is their best album, Let It Be.
Dream, 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 dream. Dream, dream, dream when I want you. In my arms when I want you. And all your charms whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream. Dream, dream, dream.
All right. Thank you, Peter, for joining us here for Side 2, as I'm calling it, Day 2 of our recording. That was the Everly Brothers' All I Have to Do Is Dream. And you said at the beginning of our interview that that was the song when you were 4.5 years old that made you feel something. And I'm wondering, is that feeling that you got from that song, is it something that still occurs to this day?
It does. And even with that song, just you put it on right there, and I think I might have gasped a little bit into the microphone, so apologies to the producer. The Everleys were, I think probably in my record collection, it's I have the most records I have by any single artist would be the Beatles, but second would certainly be the Everly Brothers, and they were just so groundbreaking for the time, the way they fused country and pop, and those harmonies are things that they're really, we used to say, the Cadillac of harmony singing. And they had such an impact on all of the, especially the English invasion bands, Beatles, Hollies, etc. And that's the thing, I guess. Music just has an impact on me that just never lets go. And so all these years later, I still have a new favorite song or band or album every couple of weeks.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure where I was going to put this, but you used the word favorite, so I'll use it right off the bat here. Okay, this is what I'm calling. It's off script, Jen. Sorry. Play favorites. Okay. So this is my play favorites. All right. We'll try to make it. I think it'll be quick, but we'll see. Your favorite Beatle?
Paul McCartney.
Your favorite Beatles album?
Revolver.
Off topic, but your first album?
Meet the Beatles.
Really? So Revolver and then Meet the Beatles. All right. Your favorite live show?
Oh, that's tough. It actually might be the McCartney show that he the first time he toured with the band that he's still playing with back in 2001, maybe. And they did the show where, they came and played the Staples Center in Los Angeles and opened with Hello Goodbye. And there was a screen covering the stage. I don't know if you've seen film or if you were at it, but there was a screen, and they had these kind of almost Cirque du Soleil type people in costume and clowns and things, like just coming out of the tunnels in the auditorium, coming out of the, walking through as people were seated. And then they all kind of converged on the stage and started doing tumbling and artful, things with their bodies, twisting and turning and stacking themselves on top of each other. And then all of a sudden, a spotlight hit the back of the stage, and there was McCartney's silhouette, and it was him with the Hofner bass. Uh-huh. And you could just recognize it from, we had seats towards the back. And that moment, it was just like bang. I mean, it was the most exciting concert intro I'd ever seen. And again, they opened with Hello Goodbye, and it was 2.5-hour show, 40-some songs. Unbelievable. Probably my favorite show I've ever seen.
Awesome. I saw the Beatles. I saw Paul McCartney at the Dodger Stadium about 5 or 6 years ago. I think that was the last time he was here. That was an amazing show.
I was at that show too.
The Ringo Starr showed up?
When Ringo came at the end. Yep, my boy and I were there. My wife was still in Michigan, where we go for the summer. We go for a couple of weeks, and she was already tied up there and was so sad that she couldn't go to the McCartney show. And then once she heard Ringo had joined him, she was kicking herself, and probably still is.
All right, I'm going to continue. A couple more favorites. Your favorite Replacements album?
Let It Be.
This might be the same answer. Favorite Twin Tone album?
Well, yeah, probably Let It Be.
All right, favorite new artist?
Favorite new artist? Well, I would probably say I think maybe the most impressive new artist to come along, in my estimation, over the last maybe decade is Phoebe Bridgers.
Phoebe Bridgers, an LA girl.
Yep.
Right. And do you have a favorite band of the 2000s?
Favorite band of the 2000s? Well, I might say Supergrass, although they were breaking up in the early 2000s. I've often said that I think David Bowie's 2013 album, The Next Day, is the greatest rock album of the 21st century so far.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Personally, I think it's a completely overlooked album, and especially because Black Star, the one after it, and his final album, released 2 days before he passed away,
right,
got so much attention, deservedly so, but I don't think it's as good a record as the one before it. The Next Day, to me, was a complete thought that he got to make from start to finish exactly the way he wanted it. And Black Star, I think he was rushing to finish something because he knew he was dying. And I think it's partially a little unfinished or incomplete.
All right. Okay, back to some of the questions that I had prepared for you. We left off, we were starting to, talking about the recording that was taking place of Let It Be, and I wanted to kind of go into what I've heard a couple different stories of how they chose that title for the album, and I wonder if you can tell us your version of the story.
Well, I believe that the way it happened was they had kicked around a couple of different titles for that one, as they always did as we were recording what was to be their next album. And at one point, nobody could sort of agree on one particular title. Some were goofy, some were more serious, and everything in between. And then one day, I believe that we were hanging around the CC Club, which was a bar kitty corner from the record store where I worked. And Westerberg said, okay, the next song that comes on the jukebox is going to be the name of our new album. And suddenly there were those piano chords, and it was McCartney singing Let It Be, and we all kind of laughed. And I think I made some kind of crack about, you shouldn't name your album Let It Be because it's the Beatles. It's the Beatles album. And Westerberg said, yeah, I mean, he would give me a hard time because I was such a Beatle nut. So part of it, I think, was just the happenstance of the song coming on the jukebox. Part of it was poking fun at me a little bit for my obsession with the band.
So how did you feel about ultimately, going with that album title? Were you, appalled at it?
No, I thought it was funny. I thought it was a very Replacements-esque thing to do. And I think, to sort of fast forward when we were making the next record, for the longest time, the next record was supposed to be called Let It Bleed.
Yeah, from
and
Rolling Stones.
And then at the last minute, they changed Westerberg changed his mind and said, I want to call it Tim. It's such a nice name.
It's such a weird name.
But I thought it would have been I thought a great part of the Replacements history to have put out Let It Be and followed it up with Let It Bleed. To me, that would have been just...
But that would have been too linear for the Replacements, I think.
Possibly.
Yeah. When I saw you at Licorice Pizza, you mentioned something about being the driver in the van, famously photographed on the album Let It Be on the back.
Yep.
And I just wanted to ask if you can kind of share with us like what a drive might. My clever wording was from Duluth to Madison, or from Madison to Duluth. I'm not sure which way it is, but again, a reference to one of the Replacement songs. What might a drive been like for you with Paul Westerberg in the passenger seat?
Well, it would have been, he would have been punching the buttons on the radio. He was a guy who was always looking for that next song. You're listening to something on a station that's fading out, and then you're coming into a new town, and there's a station fading in, and he was always trying to find that song that was going to light him up. And the band were... they would have some shenanigans in the back. There were a lot of wrestling matches, and there was a lot of drinking. They drank all the time while we were driving, so there was a lot of having to pull over for somebody to go to the bathroom. There were times I remember, like, we would be driving along and suddenly be, oh my God, there's a police car coming up behind us, and they would take their beers and shake them up and spray me with beer. So if I'd gotten pulled over, I would have reeked of alcohol. Fortunately, that didn't happen.
Wow.
And of course, we made mixtapes for the van, and that was always really fun. The mixtapes were, depending on who made it, there would be some songs everybody liked and some songs that some people didn't like, and so there'd be some, nasty comments made or arguments started. And I think I've often said that there were only two bands that you could put on in the Replacements van that no one would complain about, and that's NRBQ and Big Star.
Big Star. Yeah, that brings us to another topic that I kind of wanted to touch on was your meeting with Alex Chilton at a famous club in New York City. Can you kind of tell us how that happened?
Wow, boy, that was heavy. We had a booking agent by the name of Frank Riley, fantastic agent. At the time, he was a young agent working for a company called Singer Management, which was Bob Singerman's company. And Frank took us under his wing at a time when nobody else would touch the Replacements with a 10-foot pole. Frank was incredibly important to the band. And sometime a couple years into our relationship, he called me excitedly saying Alex Chilton had called him, had been in kind of retirement, living in New Orleans, just working really as a bar back in a little bar called Jimmy's Tavern in New Orleans. And he said, Alex got in touch with me, said he wants to come out of retirement and play some shows, and he wants me to book him. And I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. And so we, of course, immediately started scheming of ways for Alex and the Replacements to play together. The thing that was weird about it, we were such fans, we had a hard time comprehending the idea of Alex Chilton opening for the Replacements. We thought they should have been opening for him.
Yeah.
But he was not that well known, and the Replacements were kind of up and coming, so it was going to be a series of shows with Alex opening. And then we figured out this is a long answer, but we figured that Alex needed sort of a bottom line fee to be able to do it. He'd been around the block a few times. He wasn't going to be, playing for peanuts,
right.
and he needed hotel rooms. He wasn't going to be crashing on people's couches every night if he could help it. So we tried to scheme a way where some of the money we made could be funneled to Alex without him knowing, because we didn't want to insult him, or we didn't want him to feel like we were, being a charity. He was a charity case.
Okay.
And so anyway, most of those dates just didn't happen for one reason or another, the actual series of dates we thought we were going to do. Because there were, at that time, now when you talk about Alex Chilton or Big Star, they're very well known. At this time, they were still undiscovered. You still could barely buy the Big Star records. They were on a small label out of Memphis called Ardent Records, and they were difficult to get, and then reissued overseas in England, and I'd try to buy them to sell at our record store in Minneapolis, but you couldn't always get as many as you needed. I'd order 20 and they'd send me 8 or whatever it was. And so anyway, long story short, we didn't end up doing a series of dates with them, but Frank said we were going to do a show in New York at CBGB's in December of 1984 with Alex opening. And along the way, after we'd gotten the date booked, we found out that we got booked in a bigger club about a week and a half later, a place called Irving Plaza, which is 1,200 capacity maybe in Midtown or 11th Street and Broadway maybe, or somewhere up there. And because we were doing the big show at Irving Plaza, that put our CBGB show the week and a half before in jeopardy. So the booking agent, Frank Riley, said, you're going to have to do the CB's show unannounced if Hilly Crystal, the owner of CB's, will agree to that. We'd already played CB's a bunch. I got along with Hilly really well. He didn't like the Replacements at all, frankly. But for some reason, he and I got along super well. And I talked to Hilly, as did Frank Riley, and just said, please, can we just do this under a fake name? I think we'll still, word of mouth will get around, and we'll have a packed room, and it won't affect this great advantage that we've got playing, advancing, graduating to a larger club. And Hilly was, said okay. So I said to Westerberg, what do you want to play? What's the fake name you want to play? What's the pseudonym? And he said, we'll be Gary and the Boners, which of course was not much of a secret, made it not much of a secret.
Right.
And a couple of funny things about that. One was that Alex said, well, if the Replacements are going to play under a fake name, I want to play under a fake name too. Oh. And Frank Riley was like, what do you mean? You're making a comeback. Don't you want to put your name out there? And he said, no, I want to use a pseudonym. So Alex played under the name The Deteriorating Situations with his little trio. And the other funny thing about it was we had a couple weeks or a month or so before, we had a call from the Village Voice, fantastic, influential newspaper from New York, a weekly, and they had wanted to send a writer out on the road with us for a few days to write a story about the band. So they sent out this gentleman by the name of R.J. Smith. He took his life into his hands and rode in our van for a couple of days. And we had a crazy time, and he wrote a story about the band, and we knew that there was going to be a story in the Village Voice, but I don't remember that we knew anyway. At the time, it ended up being on the cover of the Village Voice. So there we are, these, kids from the Midwest suddenly walking around New York City, and there's their ugly mugs staring out at us from every newsstand on every corner. It was really quite a bizarre experience. Yeah. But that made all the fancy record company people in New York, like the talent scouts, going, who's this band I've never heard of playing, on the cover of the Village Voice? And then as the publicity for the Gary and the Boners show started to circulate around New York City, people put, 2 and 2 together. And so the club was packed, absolutely packed to the rafters. The Replacements were so excited to be playing with Alex Chilton, to be in a room with Alex Chilton, they maybe had a couple extra cocktails. And so we all watched Alex's show. It was brilliant, fantastic. And then the Replacements came on, and they were so loaded that they barely played any of their own songs. It really was a terrible, terrible show. And people left in droves because it was only the diehards stuck it out. Yeah. And there's there's bootlegs of that show, and it really is. It's funny, but there were shows where they were drunk that were just funny and fun, and there were shows where they were drunk where it was kind of funny, but it was sort of like, oh my God, when is this going to be over? And am I going to even be able to get paid for what they're doing on stage right now at the end of the night? And so it was Yeah, it was just plain bad show, but it did allow us to meet Alex. The funny thing about that was at the end of the night, I was up when you walked in CBGB's, just to the right, there were a couple of big desks pushed together in a little alcove, and that's where Hilly's kind of quote-unquote office was. So I'd gone up there to get paid. Hilly and I are shooting the breeze. He's counting money, ticket stubs, whatever, and trying to, figure the numbers out. And all of a sudden he says, "Oh, Peter, have you met Alex?" And I turned, and I didn't realize it, but Alex Chilton had walked up and was standing right next to me. And he was waiting to get paid, too. And we hadn't been formally introduced at that point. We'd passed each other in the club on the way to the bathroom or whatever. But I didn't have the nerve to introduce myself. So Hilly introduced us. And I just worked up the nerve to say to Alex, I said, "I'm a big fan. I'd love to buy you lunch sometime if you've got time." And he just looked at me and said, "Well, Peter, that'd be nice." He said, "How about tomorrow?" So I ended up going to meet him for lunch, and that kind of started a relationship that lasted until he passed away in 2010. We got to be really good friends, and it's, people talk often about, meeting your heroes can be not always a pleasant experience. Mm-hmm. Meeting Alex was, for the most part, really great. He was a cantankerous guy, so, he wasn't always the friendliest, but he and I got along really well, and he stayed at my apartment many, many times, and we got to be good friends. So it was a fortuitous meeting, and at the same time, I'd been actually running out the door to go to the meeting after, the night before we'd been out late. Of course, CBGB's, packing up the gear, getting back to the hotel, trying to get to sleep at a reasonable hour. So I get up a little early, and I'm running out to meet Alex, and I had to we were staying in a place called the the Iroquois up by Times Square, and we had these rooms that were little suites that had a couple of bedrooms and a living room couch that pulled out into a double bed, and we'd all, find our spots there. Anyway, I went into one of the rooms where Paul was sleeping and just said, "Hey, Paul, I've got to run out for a few minutes, or for a couple hours, but you've got an interview at 2:00. I'll be back to get you, to take you there. So please, if you go out to eat or wander out from the hotel, please be back at such and such a time." And he's still in bed, and he's got the covers over his head. Yeah, get out of here. I'm sleeping, whatever. And right as I'm about to close the door, he goes, "Wait a minute, where are you going so early?" And I said, "I'm going to meet Alex for lunch." And Westerberg shot out of bed like a rocket, said, "Can I come?" I said, "Of course you can come." He threw some water on his face, put some clothes on. We ran out the door, jumped in a taxi, and went down to St. Mark's, where we were meeting Alex. And if you listen to the words to the song Alex Chilton, he actually talks about that meeting in there fairly specifically. Westerberg does. But anyway, we sat in an Indian restaurant, and Alex was just, enamored with what he'd seen the night before, even though it was kind of a kamikaze show. Yeah. And at one point, Westerberg got up and to run to the restroom. And so I'm sitting there with Alex, and he kind of leans over the table, and he goes, "Man," he said, "I thought they were really amazing last night." And I thought, is he pulling my leg? Because I thought they sucked. But he seemed, that was the kind of thing Alex liked. He liked those edgy, crazy, like I said, kamikaze shows. And he said, "I'd really love an opportunity to work with them in the studio sometime." And I said, "If you're serious, you tell me when, and I'll book studio time right now." And he said, "How about right after the first of the year? I'm free the second week in January." I said, "Okay." I looked at a calendar. I said, "How about, these dates?" And he said, "That's good. I can do that." I went to a payphone in the restaurant, called back to the studio. I called Steve Felstead, actually, the engineer, said, "I need to book some time for the replacements. I'm bringing in a producer." And Steve said, "Okay." He marked it off the calendar. And, "Oh, by the way, who's the producer?" I said, "Alex Chilton." And there was this long pause, and Steve Felstead says, "I'm going to work in the studio with Alex Chilton?" I said, "Yes, you are." So that's how it all happened.
And then Alex was considered to be the producer on the next album, right?
Well, that's what we did. It was January of 1985, and when he came to Minneapolis, he stayed in my apartment for the first of many times, and we recorded 3 songs while he was there. We did "Can't Hardly Wait," with, all new songs, of course. "Can't Hardly Wait," "Left of the Dial," and a song called "Nowhere Is My Home." And 2 versions of "Can't Hardly Wait," actually, an acoustic one, Westerberg and just Chris Mars doing some percussion. and then we did a full band version. So 4 recordings, but only 3 songs. And the version of Left of the Dial actually is the same version that's on Tim, with a few extra overdubs afterwards. But Alex is singing the harmonies on that song, if you listen carefully.
Yeah, that also he made his appearance in the following album, which was the song Alex Chilton.
Yep.
And it was the stash in my putting my stash in the trash down by St. Mark's Place, I think was probably not exactly the line.
Checking his stash in the trash at St. Mark's Place, I think is what he says. And that was really when Paul and I pulled up in the taxi. Alex was standing on the corner, and he, I guess that I don't know what he was doing. It looked like he was looking through the trash when we got out of the,
I always thought that was a drug reference. Is there anything to do with drugs there?
Alex wasn't really, Alex liked to smoke pot. I don't think he was doing anything else at the time.
In my mind, it was like, oh, but there's a cop coming, so he stuck his Coke or whatever in the trash can. That was in my mind purely.
Oh, he'd just come out of a bodega and he'd bought a pack of cigarettes and, had a little carton of matches, and I think he was lighting a cigarette when we pulled up.
On the corner of St. Mark's Place.
Yep.
And then, what was the other line that I was going to say? Oh, shoot. I never travel far with a little big star.
Yeah.
Famous. So back onto your experiences with the Replacements. We were talking about them goofing around in Hootenanny in the warehouse, and I said you should be the adult in the building, and you said never. So you would never have dared to, I guess, interfere or try to discipline, although it seemed like you were at least trying to keep him on track. It's Paul, 2:00, we have to get to this appointment. Okay. So you're there, you're at least a guiding force, right? So so like when they pulled that Hootenanny prank, you decided, I'm not going to stop it. So it seems to me like you gave the band a lot of rope, so to speak, to do their thing. So the overall question here is, if the Replacements were not in your hands, if they were in the hands of another producer, do you think they would have become the band that they become, or do you think they would have become a band at all?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I think that I was lucky to have come into their world at the time that I did. I think that going back to what we talked about in part 1 of this interview, when Westerberg first gave me the tape, I was receiving tapes for 2 reasons, either auditions for Twin Tone Records or people trying to get jobs opening for somebody else at the club where I DJ'd. And I didn't always know why people were bringing me the tapes. And in the case of Westerberg giving it to me, he had specifically given it to me to get a gig at the Longhorn. I interpreted, I liked it so much, I actually asked him, are you thinking of doing a 45 or a full-length LP? Long pause. He didn't think that it was worth recording. He did not think they were ready to go into the studio yet. So I think I recognized something early on. There's a guy that I did radio with back in Minneapolis, Billy Golfus, once said, Peter knew they were great before Peter knew Paul was great before his mother did. That was a line that he used to say all the time, and I think there's some smidgen of truth there. And so I think I gave them a boost. And, I was in a pretty prominent position in the music scene in Minneapolis. As, again, we were talking about the other day. I managed the record store, which was, kind of the only show in town at the time, in terms of doing the left of center kind of inventory that we had. I had started a record label, and I DJ'd in the hip club. I mean, I was a pretty good guy to, get involved with on a band level like that. So I was able to help them out, and there was a level of trust that came into the picture very quickly. And, things got rocky as things went on. Westerberg thought they should be making more money and getting popular quicker. And I tried to explain, look, it doesn't always happen the way you think it's going to happen. You got to dig your heels in, and you got to. This is a long game. This is not a, I want to, have some success and have it be over in 2 years. This is something you want to set up your life for a career. And so It was there were definitely lots of ups and downs, and I did have to scold them from time to time, or say, look, if it's your choice, we can either do this or not. But if we don't do it, I don't think we're going to get an offer to do something even better, the next month or something. I think this would be shooting ourselves in the foot. I would just say, and I didn't so much tell them not to do stuff as I tried to encourage them to do the things that made the most sense, at least in my mind. So it was not really being like, that's bad, don't do that. It was more like, I think we should lean this way, It's your decision ultimately, but I think we should go this direction. And they'd often kind of agree to that. So I know that in the book Trouble Boys, at one point, that question is asked. I think Bob Mayer asked Westerberg, do you think you would have made it without Peter? And he said, well, I think someone else would have gotten us out of the basement if it hadn't been for Peter. And I think, well, that's a possibility. And I never said that without me, they would not have been famous. But I think there's a possibility that if I hadn't come along, the stars wouldn't have lined up for them in the same way. And, they were not really capable of putting one foot in front of the other. And so I think that it's possible, that band, those four guys, might have dissolved, and Paul might have gone on to write songs with other people, but it might not have had the same, because those guys were like, there was a brotherhood there between the four of them for a long time that was really key. And I'm not sure that had that kind of gone away, that they would have, yeah.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
One of the folks at the Licorice Pizza event mentioned your involvement, and he called you the fifth replacement, and I would agree with that.
Oh, well, thank you.
So without your influence and your guidance, I don't think we would have had, those first four albums. And then afterwards, I think there's a lot of good albums that came afterwards, but then there's some that kind of started to slowly go in a different direction.
Yeah, I think Paul in particular often sort of feels like Sorry Ma and Stink in particular he wasn't really ready. He thinks he wasn't ready to make a record yet. So he thinks maybe Hootenanny was where he first started to really show some signs of being worthy of a record, and certainly with Let It Be. But I think, I know people who think Sorry Ma is the best punk rock record ever made, even though it's not a flat-out punk rock record. And I know people who, often Stink, because it's only 8 songs, is kind of forgotten. They talk about, the albums, Sorry Ma, Hootenanny, Let It Be, etc. But Stink was an important part of that puzzle, and I don't. I think somebody had to write School, right? And a song like I Need a Goddamn Job. How could you get more basic than that? I think that those were and it was a fun record to make. We made it in secret. It was just it was really, really a fun thing. So I think that again the influence that they have is a combination of those first 4 records that we made independently, and if any of that had changed, it would be a different different scenario.
The chemistry was there,
yeah,
and it had to be the way it was. And some days on my bad days at school, I'll say, I have a song I'd like to play today, and it's school, my school. And sometimes I feel that way. Just kidding, PCC administration.
I remember when he was first singing it, and I caught the line in there, the teacher's got a butt like a mule. And I thought, that's something I think I could have heard a fellow student say, when I was in grade school. It was so real.
And those lyrics, man. Yeah, every time, Paul, with those lyrics, it just throw you off, right?
Yep.
And I remember talking to my buddy Jeff in like 1992, and I just was expounding on how much I love the Replacements. I just remember and just saying it was something about every single song. There was some little tweak or something that was unexpected in almost every single song that kind of kept me interested coming back.
Yeah.
There was just something about Paul's songwriting.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to post the Replacements. By the way, we do want to mention the Replacements Let It Be deluxe box set is out now, and maybe before we go to the next thing, you wanted to mention something about the person who wrote the liner notes. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, we've had a an embarrassment of riches in terms of great writers writing about the Replacements over the years, from the great Minneapolis writers like Marty Keller and John Bream and Jim Walsh to the national people like, R.J. Smith and Gina Arnold and Chris Morris out here in L.A. I mean, we had so many great writers. And then Bob Mayer, of course, who wrote the book, the Replacements biography, a fantastic writer. And he's written liner notes for all the box sets so far. And he wanted to take a little break from doing these projects. And so the team had really been Bob and Jason Jones from Rhino, with me participating to one degree or another in the first box sets. I produced the Sorry Ma one with those two guys, and then I was asked to produce the Let It Be box set, not knowing that Bob Mayer was stepping out of the picture originally. So that one was produced by myself and Jason Jones. And along the way, we thought, well, we need to get liner notes. Are we going to, Bob's taken a step out. Who are we going to get? And, of course, my first thought probably was David Frick, who's, I think, one of the best music writers in the world. And then I kind of thought, you know what, maybe we should take a chance. Let's do something a little risky, and let's see if we can track down this woman, Elizabeth Nelson, who's a writer from the East Coast. She's written for, oh my gosh, she writes for the Washington Post and the New York Times and New Yorker and the Atlantic, I think, and the great blog Ringer. And I knew that she was a Replacements fan, and I got in touch with her. And unfortunately, when I called her, when I wrote to her, actually emailed her, we were down to a little bit of a wire deadline-wise to get the package out, this fall as it came out, fall of 25. And so when I got in touch with her finally, I said, I'd love to invite you to write the liner notes if you want to, if you can. But the caveat is that I need them in 3 weeks, so I don't know if that's going to be a deal breaker or not. And she wrote back in seconds and said, how many ways can I say yes, in all capital letters? And it was for me one of the thrills of the recent past. And she wrote liner notes. There's about 5,400 words in there. Lengthy essay. I think that her liner notes are one of the best things about this new box set. And again, that's with no disrespect to all the other great writers we've had in the past. I just think Elizabeth Nelson knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, she brings her perspective on the band from a female perspective.
Exactly. I think that was important. And I think one of the things she says is the Replacements were no more capable of making a bad album in 1984 than the Rolling Stones were in 1970. And I think that's a heavy statement, and one that I heartily agree with.
They were at the peak of their prowess.
Yep. At
that time. So after the success of Let It Be, which obviously it became monumentally critically acclaimed, popularity, I'm sure it was the biggest seller up to that point.
Yep, biggest seller on Twin Tone ever, actually.
So you at one point in your book mentioned you didn't mind being the farm team for the majors.
That's right. That was really a independent label's job back in the day. These days, indies are given the major labels a run for their money in many, many cases. And the major labels are poaching bands from the indie labels. I mean, they always have, but you take somebody like the Fontaines D.C., who I think are one of the best bands of the last decade. And, they made their first records for Partisan, a New York-based label, offices in London and L.A., of course. But then they got scooped up by, what are they on now? I can't even think of the label. I'm blanking on it. But anyway, they moved on to a larger label. And so anyway, that's the way it works. And that's what Twin Tone really did. We felt like we took a chance on the early bands, helping them make their first records, and then prepare them for hopefully an advancement to a company with more resources than we had, with more money, ability to take them to the next level, so to speak.
So the Replacements were your baby, from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then, but you meet a guy named Seymour Stein, over there at the Sire Records. And he also loves the Replacements, and he wants to bring the Replacements to Sire Records, which led to their debut, major label debut, Tim. Can you tell us a little bit about that time and how the Replacements, this is kind of a sensitive, how the Replacements told you that maybe they didn't really want you around in the studio anymore?
Oh yeah, that was not the nicest day of my life. Well, we ran into Seymour in New York that same trip that we did the show with Alex Chilton at CBGB's when we played the club that I mentioned earlier, Irving Plaza. It was, maybe around the teens of December, coming up to Christmas. There were a lot of people, from record labels popping in, club hopping to see, Christmas shows or whatever. And Seymour Stein popped in to see the Replacements. He'd heard a lot about them from other people, and he was blown away. The show they done at CBGB's, falling down on their faces drunk, they felt maybe like they had something to prove when they came back to New York for the Irving Plaza show, and they played their butts off, and they really, really put on a great show. I could totally see why Seymour would get so excited. And basically, he told our lawyer, who was also at the show, that he said, I'm going to have these guys signed to Sire Records before they even get home from this tour. So we started talking about the possibility of, who was going to produce the record. We'd done the session, after Seymour had expressed interest and wanted to sign them to Sire. We had already talked to Alex Chilton about coming into Minneapolis just to record some demos. And so that was already on the table, and we did that in January of '85. But then in late January, early February, we started talking about who's going to be the real producer. I think Warner Brothers, the mother company to Sire, didn't think, Alex was a big enough name, perhaps, or that he was the right producer for one reason or another. And I guess we weren't sure either. And we also wanted to be cooperative with the large label. We wanted to take their advice to some extent, and without kissing ass or being too cooperative. And so I know I had written to Robin Hitchcock, actually. We'd crossed paths with him, and we were big fans of his work. And I remember writing him a letter about the possibility of him producing a Replacements record, and he declined. So it came up that Michael Hill, who was kind of the day-to-day A&R guy at Warner Sire, he suggested the possibility, or Seymour maybe told Michael to ask us this, but he said maybe Tommy Erdely from the Ramones would be a good idea to produce the record. We loved that idea because we were huge Ramones fans. And so we flew Tommy Erdely in March to Minneapolis to do a little test recording session, and it went really well. So we booked it, full studio time, 6 weeks, starting at the end of June, going into July, and flew Tommy Erdely into town. And the night before the recording sessions for what became the Tim album happened, we all got together at my apartment, all 4 guys in the band, Tommy Erdely and myself, and we were just talking about what was going to happen. And all of a sudden, Westerberg said, "By the way, Peter, we don't want you in the studio while we're making this record," the night before we were going in. I planned my next 6 weeks as being, part of the session. I wasn't necessarily, especially with bringing in somebody like Tommy Erdely, the first real outside producer the Replacements had. I wasn't going to get in anybody's way. I'm happy to keep my mouth shut, but I figured I would be part of the sessions to one degree or another. And so that came as quite a shock and hurt my feelings. But they just, I guess that it was sort of the beginning of our separation. And I guess the best way that I could describe it, and after having a lot of years to think about it, it's a little bit like when you're a kid, at some point you got to move out of your parents' house, right? Much as you love your parents, sometimes you don't love, some people don't love their parents, but I sure did. And I think, lots of people do. I think, that was kind of what it was with the Replacements. We'd done 4 records together, and they wanted to do something without me. And it took me a while to understand that, but I do now. And I wish that it had been done in a nicer fashion. in a way that didn't hurt my feelings, but that's the way it went. And at the same time, dealing with Warner Brothers for me I definitely was out of my element. There were a couple of times where I had to get on a plane and fly to New York to talk about budgets and, marketing and things like that. And I thought, this is not my world. I am not somebody who is very good at talking to the suits. And so I may have been the first one to say it, that I think we need to hire actual formal managers. Mm-hmm. And my theory and my feeling in that was that I would remain personal manager, and we would have somebody that would take care of the things that were out of my wheelhouse, beyond me. And so there was a little bit of overlap. We what do they say? We put out our shingle saying that we wanted management. Nobody came to the table. Nobody was interested in managing the replacements. We ended up having 3 possibilities. One was a gentleman, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but he was a bit more of a formal producer, might have been involved with Talking Heads and some of the other New York bands, but I think he was interested, and then when he did his research on the band, he never even took a meeting. He said, no, these guys are too wild for me. Second guy was a guy from Phoenix, Mike Lembo, who was in the publishing sector, but also did some management. He was interested in meeting with us, came to Minneapolis. We met with him, thought he was a cool guy, maybe not exactly the right guy. And then we met with a couple of young bucks from New York, Russ Rieger and Gary Habib, and we thought, these are the young guys. We kind of want to go with somebody fresh and new rather than an old guard sort of manager person. So we signed on with them, and I just assumed, again, I'd be their personal manager, they'd be the business managers, and that lasted about 6 months. Mm-hmm. And then Westerberg actually asked me to step down, and I did.
So you are no longer working with the Replacements now. You're still at Twin Tone, and I was wondering what did you do at Twin Tone after the Replacements?
Well, I didn't really do a whole lot at Twin Tone, to be honest. That was a very difficult point in my life. It was, I've said it before, it was a bit like being kicked out of a club you helped start. And rather than wise up and say, geez, part of the reason that they didn't want me around anymore was because I was drinking too much, rather than cooling it on the drinking, I drank more because I guess I was drowning my sorrows. So I basically went on sabbatical from Twin Tone. I got a day job helping a friend work in his dad's warehouse just to pay the rent. If you want the honest-to-God truth about it, I think it was I entered into a phase of my life that was a slow, chicken-shitted attempt at committing suicide by alcohol. Mm-hmm. And so I drank and did some other substances that weren't good for me, and I got good and sick. And so I stepped out of the Replacements thing in the spring of 1986. I did some other things during the time besides working at my friend's dad's warehouse. I also worked with the band 13 Engines that I think we were talking about the other day from Toronto. So I did some traveling with them. But I was not in great shape, and I actually had to leave. I resigned from 13 Engines because I just knew that I wasn't able to do the job that they needed. And fast forward to 1991, I got very, very sick. And my roommate at the time, I was sharing a place with a guy who worked at a record distributor in St. Paul, and he and another friend of mine basically did an intervention, and said, we need to take you to the ER. You're in bad shape. And I knew that I was in trouble, and I didn't argue, and they took me to the ER, and that was a tough one. I actually had a seizure while I was waiting. Mm. And they had to cut my clothes off, and apparently I had 2 more seizures while I was in the emergency room. I was in intensive care for 8 days.
Oh, my.
And I frankly, I was told when I came to in a hospital room a few days later, I remember opening my eyes and my doctor was sitting there and he looked at me and he said, it's an absolute miracle you're alive. So interestingly enough, and this might sound sort of trivial, but my first thought was, I can't die yet. I've got a lot of records to make. And that was what I held on to, and I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps and got back to work. My partner, Paul Stark, welcomed me back, provided me with a new office and a new desk, and I got back down to business. I said, hey, if I'm going to bring in some new bands, new artists, maybe I'll give my work a new label name, and we'll have a new imprint under the Twin Tone umbrella. So I decided on calling my new label Medium Cool Records. And so in the summer of '91, I started basically working with a couple of different bands. One, as we talked again, the last segment one, I was involved with the REM guys. Peter Buck had recommended a band to me called the Dashboard Saviors. And I had gone down, just before I actually went into the hospital, I had gone down to stay with Peter in a new big house he'd bought right after they'd signed the big deal with Warner Brothers Records. He invited me down to hang out for a while, and that's where I saw the Dashboard Saviors. And then I went through my, breakdown and hospitalization and treatment afterwards. When I got back on my feet, I called Peter again and said, I'm interested in recording this band, the Dashboard Saviors. He said, great, because I'd like to produce the album. And I was hoping that you'd want to have it on Twin Tone. And I said, well, it'll be Twin Tone Medium Cool. He said, fine, no problem. So I worked with Peter and the Dashboard Saviors on that record. And I signed another group called the Leatherwoods. And they were a band from Kansas. For me, kind of a dream band. I would say they were a little bit of a combo of the Beatles and the Everly Brothers. And had a guy named Todd Newman, who was the main singer, guitar player, and the drummer was Tim O'Regan, who played drums and sang. And Tim would go on to join the Jayhawks and is still in the Jayhawks. So he's, to me, one of the great vocalists one of the great vocalists I've ever gotten close to. So anyway, we made a record with the Leatherwoods, we made a record with the Dashboard Saviors, and they came out in the summer of '92. And then I ended up making 11 more records under the name Medium Cool. Did a Tommy Stinson record with his band Perfect. Did 2 Slim Dunlap records. I worked with a guy from Athens. I'd gotten to know the Athens people through work with REM and hanging around Athens. Athens became kind of my home away from home. And I signed a guy named Jack Logan, who had been kind of an affiliate of the Dashboard Saviors. He'd written some lyrics for one of their songs that caught my ear. And Jack Logan became kind of a big, big deal for me. I don't know if you've ever paid attention to his records, but we did a crazy first album for him that had 42 songs on it. It was called Bulk. And it made quite a big splash. David Frick wrote a big piece on it for the Rolling Stone. We got invited to do the Conan O'Brien show when it was still in New York. The Today Show became interested in Jack Logan and filmed us on 2 different occasions and did long public interest stories on this crazy, prolific songwriter from small town Georgia. So that was kind of what I did at that point.
So you were not drinking anymore? How did you manage to just stop?
Well, I mean, I got so sick. I mean, really, again, when I woke up in the hospital, and the doctor explained to me what had happened. I think before the doctor even said it, I said, when I came to, I really remember almost like kind of, wow, pinching myself. I didn't think I was going to live. I thought I was going to buy the farm there, and I remember going, wow, I made it. I'm alive. How did this happen? This is a miracle. I am never going to have another drink as long as I live. And of course, people in recovery will tell you, don't ever say never. It's a slippery slope and all those things that they say. But I said, no, you don't understand. I will never have another drink as long as I lived, and I've never have. It just was. I scared the shit out of myself, and I've never had an urge, never had a, I mean, I'm a pretty upbeat kind of guy, so I don't have depression or anything like that. I'm very fortunate in that respect, I know. But I even in my lowest points, which aren't terribly low, I haven't succumbed to wanting to have a drink. It's just not something that I'm interested in. So, and so I think that that's a good life lesson. That I actually, as difficult as it is to talk about, part of me is happy to talk about it because it's like addiction is a terrible thing, and there's only two ways that you get out of it. You either quit or you die. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I'm an example of, hopefully to other people, it can be done, and you can go on and in treatment, the counselor I had, she said, you're going to have to change your profession because you can't be hanging around in bars all the time with rock bands. And I said, well, then shoot me now, because that's not going to happen. And then, in fact, for the night I got out of treatment, I hooked up with one of my best friends who ran the club First Avenue, the head honcho down there, Steve McClellan, one of my dearest friends. And he and I went out to dinner, and we went to a bar and saw Steve Forbert. And I wasn't staring at the bottles behind the bar, lusting after it. I was like, I'm here to see some music. I don't need alcohol.
All right. So that visit to the hospital and the ensuing days of where you're essentially comatose or in detoxing while you were unconscious for a couple of days, that was enough to get you straight.
Yep.
That's amazing. Now, you did mention in the 60s when I think it's Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, you kind of got your first taste of weed. And then, how the music might have influenced, or the drinking might have influenced your perception of the music. Do you think any of that changed after you stopped drinking?
No, it didn't. And actually, I think that Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young was a little bit later. I think my first experiences with pot were with the Mothers of Invention. But and growing up, my mother had a bit of a drinking problem, and thankfully she got over it. But I didn't have a good taste in my mouth about alcohol, so I was ripe for the picking when drugs came along.
Right.
And I loved taking drugs, I got to say, and loved smoking pot, and I still smoke pot on an occasional basis. They call it California sober, I guess. Okay. For me, listening to music and smoking pot was a revelation because music had sounded so good to me, but it sounded even better smoking pot. So that's one of those things I'll probably never give up, and I'm kind of a weekend pot smoker these days. But I don't know exactly what question am I answering here?
I guess the way you heard music has
it changed?
Affected you very much?
Well, I think I addressed it very specifically in my book, not to try to sound like I'm, just trying to sell my book here, but I remember when I got out of treatment being worried that music wasn't going to sound the same, and at that point I hadn't thought about whether or not I was going to smoke pot or not. But I remember hearing, I was a big fan of a British singer by the name of Terry Reid, and he had made a number of records from starting in 1968, just a phenomenal voice. I mean, I joke about it. I almost remember what I was wearing the first time I heard Terry Reid's voice. It was so powerful. And he comes from that raspy voiced British rock singer school, like Paul Rogers, who sang for the band Free and later Bad Company, or Rod Stewart or Frankie Miller, those great, Steve Marriott from the Small Faces. And Terry Reid could very well be the best of the bunch. And so right when I was getting out of treatment in 1991, a new record came out by Terry Reid. It was on Warner Brothers. It was called The Driver. And he did a cover of the Waterboys song, Hole of the Moon. And I'm not sure exactly what Mike Scott wrote that song about specifically, but for me, it really was he sings, you saw the crescent, I saw the whole of the moon. And for me, that was kind of like, you've had your dalliances with addiction. I nearly died.
Right.
I saw the whole of the moon. That was what it said to me. And I remember getting that feeling almost like I'd gotten when I heard All I Have to Do Is Dream when I was 4.5 years old. It just was an overwhelming feeling, like that feeling maybe like you get standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and you get that, just that I don't even know what the word is, but I got that feeling from the Terry Reid song, and I actually cried tears of joy that right then and there. And I thought, you know what? I don't have to drink to get the sensation that I love so much from music. It was an important moment for me.
That was a beautiful song too, and I listened to the Terry Reid version. I have the album here somewhere with the Waterboys, right here.
Yeah.
This is the C. That was, I think, my third album that I posted on my Instagram because it's very important to me too.
Yeah, great. I met Mike Scott once, and I got to tell him that his song saved my life. And he was so cool about it. He put his hand out and he shook my hand and he said, "I'm glad to be of service, Peter."
Oh my God! Did you happen to see them recently? They came to town.
I have not. I wish I had.
I had tickets, and something came up that night, and I wasn't able to go. I saw Waterboys in the '80s, and it was one of the best shows I've ever seen. When they were full, I think Carl Wallinger and Thistle White, they were the full, band with all kinds of crazy instruments.
I knew of them, and I just never really paid attention to them. I was very late to the Waterboys party.
But anyway, that another great band from the '80s, if you ever have a chance. But okay, I wanted to move a couple years down the road now, getting into some more of your personal life. Peter, in 1993, you met Jennifer Menard, a fateful event that would have a huge impact on your life. Can you talk to us about your relationship with Jennifer and what that's meant to you?
I'd love to. I was in Los Angeles with Slim Dunlap, the gentleman who joined the Replacements to replace Bob Stinson. After they made the Pleased to Meet Me record, he joined up to play the tour and then was in the band for their last two albums, Don't Tell a Soul and All Shook Down. And Slim had, as we talked earlier too, he had been in a band called Thumbs Up that we recorded for Twin Tone in the early days. And I always liked the songs that he wrote on the side. And he was not a featured performer with Thumbs Up per se, but he would sing one or two songs per set, and I always loved them. And I started talking to him about the idea of making a record with him, and he kept poo-pooing me, saying, you don't want a record from me, you don't want a record from me. But I chased him for a long time, and then suddenly he joined the Replacements, so that was off the table for a while. And then after I got out of treatment and was back making records at Medium Cool, I said, Bob, this is before, I guess, I called him Slim sometimes, but mostly I called him Bob. I said, Bob, now's the time for you and me to make a record together. And so we did, and we ended up making two, one in 93 and one in 96. First one was called The Old New Me, second one was called Times Like This. And they're two of the records I'm most proud of having had a small hand in. And it was, so I was in Los Angeles with the Slim Dunlap Band. They were doing an in-store at the Virgin Megastore at the corner of Laurel Canyon and Sunset Boulevard. At the time, it was the largest record store in the world. And these two, at one point, sometime I think before the performance, these two girls walked up to me, and one of them was from Minnesota. And she said we had some friends in common, and she had hung around some of the clubs I'd hung around, and she was very friendly. And her name was Maria, and she said, "This is my friend Jennifer." And I saw that Jennifer was wearing a Tommy Keene T-shirt, and I kind of made mental note. I'm a big Tommy Keene fan. Who's this cool chick with a Tommy Keene T-shirt? And we became friends, and we were actually she worked in the film and TV department at Warner Records. And they represented Twin Tone actually to film and TV as an adjunct to what they did for the Warner Elektra Atlantic record labels. They did some outside labels that they represented for film and TV licensing, and coincidentally, she started representing Twin Tone, so we had a little bit of a business relationship. And a year later, we were hanging around. I'd been in Minneapolis. I was still living in Minneapolis. I was in L.A. on business again, and she had told me that. Oh, I know what it was. I was in the fall of '94. I was coming to L.A. and we had been communicating occasionally, and told her I was coming, and she called me and said, "Hey, Big Star are going to be on the Tonight Show on Halloween night. Would you like to go?" And I was like, this girl can get me into the Tonight Show? I can be a member of the audience for the Tonight Show? My God, that's the coolest thing in the world. I said, absolutely. So we got to go see Big Star, the reformed version of the band with the two guys from the Posies, Alex and Jody Stevens from the original band, and then Ken and John from the Posies. And it was great. And they did In the Street from the #1 record, Big Star album. And interestingly enough, Jay Leno introduced them by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, our next guests have been called the missing link between the Beatles and the Replacements.
Wow.
Please welcome Big Star." I just about jumped out of my skin.
Rolling Stone magazine called my next guest the missing link between the Beatles and the Replacements. They recently reunited to record this CD called Live at Missouri University. They'll be playing tomorrow night at the House of Blues right here in L.A. Please welcome Big Star.
Hanging out down the street, the same old thing we did last week. Not a thing to
And also it was interesting to me, speaking of pot smoking, there's a line in The Street where Alex sings, "Wished we had a joint so bad." And when I was 18, that record first came out, that was, of course, something that we said, me and my friends, on a daily basis, wished we had a joint so bad. So that record we really related to, and to see them sing it on national TV was a big, big deal. And afterwards, we went out to the, big Mardi Gras parade on Santa Monica Boulevard that they have every year on Halloween night.
Yeah.
And it was just a fantastic time. And I just had suddenly I started looking at Jennifer with different eyes. I fell in love with her that night. And we're still married, and I'm still in love with her.
Well, that seemed like it was a pretty good relationship then.
It's a great relationship.
Worked out pretty well.
I'm a very lucky man.
Yes. Maybe it's a good time to bring up the fact that you also had a child with Jennifer.
Yep, we did. We had a boy in 2002, and he's now 23 years old. And lo and behold, he is also now in the record business. He's doing A&R for one of the Interscope labels, and handling. He's co-head of operations and A&R for Music Soup, part of Interscope. And he's got a small management company called Somehow I'll Manage. And he's working with 3 different artists, one of which he just helped get a deal at Capitol Records, a gentleman by the name of Truman Sinclair, who I highly recommend. Also a band called Fat Evil Children, or FEC as we call them for short. Another brilliant band that Truman Sinclair is actually the lead guitar player in. And a third artist by the name of Ella Woolsey, a 21-year-old girl who's just a very, very good songwriter, musician, very inventive in her recording talents as well. So yeah, he's living the dream, and he's a music nut 24/7, just like me. I didn't see it coming, but I did see it coming. He's been a music nut for a long time, but the fact that he's really immersed himself in it and doing a great job. I'm as proud as can be.
Did you take him to shows when he was younger?
I did. We took him to shows all the time. We always like to tell people his first show was at 2 months old. We took him to the Getty, to the auditorium at the Getty, to see a group called the Resentments, which is kind of a super group from Austin, Texas, with Stephen Bruton and John D. Graham and Scrappy Newcomb and a couple other guys. And so that was fun. And Yeah, and I've been taking him to shows all along when he could get him into the all ages shows, and now he goes out more than I do to see bands, part of his job.
And he went to PCC for a year, right?
He did. He came to PCC here. It was during COVID, so he was not on campus very often. It was all from his bedroom online, but he did well, and it got him a ticket to get transferred to USC, where he did his other 3 years of college and graduated a year ago this past spring.
We'll add him to our list of famous alumni.
There you go.
I'm sure. So genetically, do you feel he has the same kind of gift you have for recognizing good music?
I think he does. It's really, we agree on so much, and there's a lot of the things he listens to, some of the the new music that's coming along, I love, and some of it I don't quite get. So there's some points where we may argue a little bit, but for the most part, he loves what we love, and he's got a good foundation, I think. He's got a thing that I think a lot of other kids his age that are in the music business don't have, is that foundation of knowing what came before, and understanding that there's never going to be another Beatles. I mean, I'm a pretty severe Beatles fan. I think to me there's the Beatles and then there's everything else. I mean, Beatles aren't even in the B's in my record collection. There's Beatle records and then the alphabet starts after that, and that's the way Autry is too. I mean, he's. He and he has that foundation, of understanding, Beatles and Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan. I mean, when we first, he first saw the light with Bob Dylan, I remember we showed him during COVID, actually, we showed him the No Direction Home Martin Scorsese film, and after it was over, he just said, that's the closest thing I've ever had to a religious experience. And I got to take him to his first Dylan show a year later, and it was a very moving moment for me as a guy who's loved Dylan since Blowing in the Wind, to see my son get it, so to speak. And David Bowie is another one. I mean, he's totally. I remember showing him one of the David Bowie biography or documentaries, and I remember him saying, "I want to be David Bowie." Things like that. So yeah, he's really he's got a good head on his shoulders, and I would also say, interestingly enough, he straddles the fence and he can talk to the suits.
Okay.
He can do some things that I could not do, and that.
So that's some of the Jennifer influence, probably.
Yeah, maybe.
You got a nice hybrid of a music person in there.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
I think it's interesting about the genetics of musical taste. My son's a little older than your son. And I don't feel like I really pushed too much music on him, but as he got older, he started playing some songs that he just found on his own, through Spotify, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, some other really famous songs from the '60s. I'm like, wow, you just found it? Yeah, I just found it on Faces. He's playing a Faces song. Like, do you know who sang this? And he's like, well, not really. I just like the sound of it. Yeah. So I give him a little history on it. Like, I think he's somehow, even though I don't feel like I ever really spent much time trying to influence him too much musically, but he still has it. It's there. It's genetic.
Yeah.
But he's also plays baseball just like me and all that.
Yeah.
Just like left-handed hitter, right-handed thrower. He's like got the same musical taste.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about genetics, I think that's one of the things when I was looking for a way to kind of open, my book. That's one of the things that, as a first-time author, I was told by other writers that were much more qualified than me to be writing books. They said just having a good opening is really important, and for me the opening was when it occurred to me. The way I had to open the book was to mention taking Autry to see a show when he was 11 years old, to see a band that we both loved on record that he'd never seen live because they mostly played 21 and over bars, but they were doing an all-ages show at the Echo over on East Sunset. And after they came on stage and they were playing, they were just putting on an amazing show. I mean, it was breathtaking. And they're kind of an arty punk rock band from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And 4 or 5 songs in, I feel a tug on my sleeve, and I lean down, and Audrey says, "Dad, sometimes I get a feeling from music I don't get from anything else." And I never forgot that. And I thought, I don't know how to describe what it is that music does for me. It's an X factor. Maybe that's why it's so important, because you can't put your finger on what it is, but it gives me a feeling that I don't get from anything else as well. And that was a very, very big day for parenting.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, thankfully you have a son, and he's as involved in the music industry. Kind of keeps you fresh, and I'm sure with the whole scene too.
It does. We were proofing some work that he was doing this morning with an engineer, back and forth on email. Yeah.
Do you still have an eye for the album art work?
I do, and I definitely get involved with that too, but mostly a little more the sonic aspect and a little more the sequencing. I'm a good sequencer. So, but we have a new Truman Sinclair thing that I'm helping him on that's coming out in March, and so we were listening to they mastered the record yesterday, so we were listening to the mastering, and it sounds beautiful.
All right, we're going to fill in the gap now between Twin Tone and then where you are today. There's one song that I wanted to play that is of a significant artist. I think that was in your life. Maybe we'll hear a few seconds of that.
I am a man. I am self-aware. And everywhere I go, you're always right there with me. I flirted with you all my life, and even kissed you once or twice. And to this day I swear it was nice, but really I was not ready.
All right, that was, who is that, sir?
Vic Chesnutt.
Can you tell us a little bit about Vic Chesnutt?
Well, that's a very heavy song about suicide.
Yeah.
And he wrote more than one song about suicide, and I knew him very well, and I went through a couple of his suicide attempts with him. So, he was on the trip that I was mentioning earlier about going down to visit Peter Buck just before I went into treatment. I remember Peter saying to me, we did a lot of record shopping together, great record stores in Athens, and we were record shopping, and he pulled out the first Vic Chesnutt album called Little, and he said, if you only buy one record by a local artist while you're down here, it should be this one. And of course I said, trust your judgment. Of course I bought it. And from the moment I listened to that record, it probably took me a couple listens, because Vic is not an easy listen. But anyway, very quickly I thought, I want to be this guy's A&R man someday. And I set my sights on that, and I was able to actually sign him to a record deal in 2002. The same month that my son was born, I signed Vic to a record deal at New West Records, and that was a big month for me. So Vic, I love Vic Chesnutt so much. He did pass away at his own hand in December of 2009 on Christmas Day, which Vic would have loved, the idea of being able to pass on such a generally happy day for so many people. That was Vic's personality. But he made 4 records that were very influential on my life, and during that time he was with a little California-based label, LA-based label called Texas Hotel. And he actually said he would like to make records with Twin Tone, but since he had the contract with Texas Hotel and he liked those people, loved those people, we weren't really able to do anything together. And then after that 4th album, he got signed to Capitol Records, and made one record for Capitol, and that didn't go well because Vic was very uncooperative with the major label world. And anyway, he went to a couple other small labels after that. He made one for Capricorn, he made one for Spin Art, and then I was able to pull him into the company New West, which is a label that I went to work for after we closed Twin Tone down in 1998. And so I got to make 2 new records with Vic, and I also got to buy those first 4 records he made for Texas Hotel. They had gone out of print, not available any longer, and I thought it was just criminal that those records weren't, it wasn't for a big audience, wasn't going to sell, enormous quantities, but they were important records, very artistically sound records, and so I was able to buy the masters of those 4 albums and reissue them on New West with Vic and I helping to expand them with bonus tracks, as you do when you do these kind of box sets. And so that was a big deal, and Vic was one of my closest friends for many, many years, and I miss him dearly.
Okay, so you did launch a new part of your career at New West Records, and you had artists such as Billy Joe Shaver, Delbert McClinton, Drive-By Truckers, Jason Isbell, and one of my favorites is Richard Thompson appeared on your label at one point, so I was pretty impressed by that. Do you feel you had a strong influence on bringing these artists to New West?
Well, New West is an interesting situation. It was started by a gentleman by the name of Cameron Strang, who's from Vancouver, BC, and through a series of events landed in Minneapolis, St. Paul for a while, and had the idea. He was an entertainment law person in Vancouver, and decided at that point in his life, no time like the present, to start a record label. And so he hooked up with Kelly Deal and made what was pretty much a punk rock record with the Kelly Deal 6000. So that was the first record on New West, which would end up becoming known as a kind of a roots rock label. But so Cam and I started working together in 1999, and Cam already had Billy Joe Shaver on the label, one of the great songwriters of all time in my book. He also had a gentleman by the name of Stephen Bruton, wonderful musician, songwriter, best known as Chris Christopherson's lead guitar player of many years. So he had some of these sort of what's now called Americana artists in place. So I did have an impact on the label in some ways, but what I really did for the most part during my 17 years at New West was work the day-to-day A&R on projects that Cam had brought in. Or after Cam left, he left in 2010, and another president came in, and so I did some of the records that he brought in as well until I left there in 2016. But so I got to bring in Vic Chesnutt, Ben Lee, who was an Australian artist that came to my attention that I convinced Cameron to sign. And Ben Lee, I think to this day, still has the biggest income for the label in terms of sync licensing. So that was one thing that I did that really helped the business side of the label. Brought in Vic Chesnutt, Chuck Prophet, Mark Eitzel, Sarah Lee Guthrie, Woody Guthrie's granddaughter. I made my left my thumbprint, shall we say. But mostly I did the A&R for Cam's stuff, and I really loved it because I was working with people like John Hyatt and Steve Earle and Christopherson, and it was an interesting thing because it's, in a way, I've had 2 experiences at indie labels, my label Twin Tone and then New West Records. And New West was a little bit like getting a second chance with better resources. We had better financing, had the ability to do bigger projects and actually entertain the idea of working with somebody like Delbert McClinton. I remember Cam coming into my office one day early on and saying, I think we should try to sign Delbert McClinton. I was thinking, smiling, yeah, that's great, Cam. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, there's no way that Delbert McClinton is going to sign to our little label. And Cam went to Nashville, met with Delbert and his wife, who's the manager, as well, Wendy Goldstein. And they loved Cam, and they signed on. And the first record we made with Delbert won a Grammy.
Yeah.
So we sold a couple 100,000 records on that. So it was a big, Cam was a smart man.
Seems like from your book, he had a lot of charisma, personality. Everyone loved him.
Yep, he did. He was, as I said to my wife when I first met him, the first meeting we had, I said, boy, this guy could walk into a banker's office and walk out 5 minutes later with a sack full of cash. I mean, you just meet him and you want to do business with him. He's honest and full of integrity and a real music fan.
But at some point, you ended up parting with New West?
I did part with New West. Cameron left in 2010, and a guy who helped finance the label came in as president, and he and I actually got along probably better than Cam and I did. But by that time, they moved me out of A&R, and that was probably because I was kind of championing things that were a little too left of center, and they wanted things that were, this was when just post Napster, when the bottom fell out of physical sales. Tough to keep a record label going, doing things that were really artistic and on the left of center, as I said. So, and I understood that, and so I moved into basically handling production on the records. And getting the records made, and then developing the back catalog stuff, which I was good at, going back and doing older releases that we had access to through some of our relationships with like Austin City Limits and things like that. We had because of the Americana thing, we had a good connection with Austin, Texas, and that whole music scene. And working with Joe Ely, for instance, who just passed away, I got to work with Joe, and he was an amazing guy on a group that he had, kind of an on and off group called the Flatlanders. I remember selling their records at Orfolk, or their one record at Orfolk back in the day. So I had a long history with him. And New West was an incredible experience for me.
I was wondering about Rhino Records. What kind of working relationship have you had with that company?
Well, I've had a lot to do with them in a couple different ways. In the early 2000 aughts, they had a head of A&R there, Cheryl Pavelski, who brought me in to do the Replacements reissues. And at that time, the Replacements legacy hadn't grown to the point where it has now. So we had smaller budgets. Rhino was kind of, not as excited about it, I'll say, although they were supportive. They weren't jumping up and down about it. And I did all 8 of the Replacements records, produced all 8 of those for reissues on CD only with bonus tracks. And so that was a fun thing. And I just knew lots of the people who worked at Rhino were my kind of people, and a lot of them were friends of mine that I go to concerts with or whatever. And then also with my wife working at Warner, in the Warner Music Group, doing film and TV, eventually her department, the film and TV department, was folded into Rhino, so she was part of the Rhino team there. And then when Bob Mayer wrote the Replacements biography, and he started campaigning to get a series of reissues going through Rhino. Again, Bob was very good at talking to the suits, and so not only did he, cement the band's legacy with writing that amazing book that was a New York Times bestseller, and a lot of people consider one of the great band biographies ever. He also convinced the Rhino people to take the Replacements more seriously, and they started investing a little bit more money in them. And we did the Live at Maxwell's. We did the version of the Don't Tell a Soul album they called Dead Man's Pop. Yeah, where because the Don't Tell a Soul record had been mixed in a way that didn't really represent the Replacements properly. It was at a time when Warner's was trying to get them on the charts on the radio and whatnot. So it was a little too shiny, a little too glossy. They actually got to go back to the original master tapes and remix it in the way that suited the songs and the Replacements better. So, that was a great big project to do. And and then Pleased to Meet Me and Sorry Ma and etc. We just did Let It Be for last month.
As a member of the Facebook replacements community, I can attest to the amount of acrimony that goes into debating the sound of the replacements records and the Maxwell's release and every other release. Then, who was the producer that, I can't think of his name now.
Matt Wallace.
The Matt Wallace mix.
Right.
All these things. Just a lot of vocal opinions about everything related to every single detail of every single album. Not to the point where I can't stand it. I'm like, who cares?
Right.
It sounds great to me.
Yeah.
But the fans will debate it for the rest of their lives.
Well, Matt was a good guy, and he recorded a good album, but they took the mixing away from him, and so it was lucky that years later he was able to go back and do the mix that he wanted and the kind of mix that the replacements wanted as well at the time. So it was really it was a correction, much like the Tim reissue. Those were the two albums that really needed to be remixed in lots of our opinions, and I think they did the right job.
That's right. The Tommy Ramone mix seemed to be a little bit thinner. Or do you know that the story was, from what I recall, there was like a speaker that was broken and a microphone that was not working, didn't make it into the mix?
No, I think that there was just, it was, there's a lot of theories about it. I think that, the Tommy Stinson, in fact, will say that, point out the fact that it was originally supposed to be mixed by Ed Stasium, that Tommy was supposed to produce and engineer, and that Ed Stasium was supposed to mix, and then Ed couldn't do it, so Tommy ended up mixing. And Tommy Stinson says that Tommy Erdely mixed on headphones too much, and that was part of what made it sound weird. I think, my personal theory is that in some ways Tommy wanted to have a career producing records, so he wanted to deliver something that Warner Brothers would really like and that would do well at radio and on the charts and all that. But he also wanted to make a record that sounded, in tune with what the Replacements were doing, because he genuinely loved the band. And so he was kind of had two sides of his brain working on that, and they didn't really meet properly in the middle, I think is what happened. But it's got some great songs on it.
Yeah.
I think it's their least good album. I think it's the eighth best Replacements record.
You do? Wow.
Don't Tell Us All.
Don't Tell Us All.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Tim.
Yeah.
Don't Tell Us All. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty commonly held feeling as well.
Yeah.
Although, a lot of great lyrics on a lot of those songs there as well.
Right, yeah.
I really appreciate those last couple albums in a lot of ways. So we talked about Bob, and he would have turned 66 yesterday. In another couple of weeks, on December 31st, Paul Westerberg will be turning 66. Do you talk to Paul very much these days? And is there any chance that you think he may ever record anything again?
I can't really say. And no, I haven't talked to Paul for a while. Our relationship has always ebbed and flowed. So I haven't talked to him recently. In fact, I'm not even sure that I can tell you when the last time was that I talked to him. But I just decided to kind of leave him alone, and if he wants to talk to me, I'm available. I work with Tommy Stinson on quite a regular basis. I don't think Tommy's talked to him in several years either.
Really?
So he's just... And I know, just because I have certain business aspects of things where I have to get in touch with his manager about stuff from time to time. And his manager, of course, is Paul's a very private guy, and his manager keeps that privacy secure, as a manager should. But I do know that Paul's just basically retired from the music business. When we've wanted to see if he would do an interview about the Let It Be box set, or I'm working on this Slim Dunlap compilation for a release in February. We had some press long lead press that wanted to know if that they would Paul would talk to them about his feelings about Slim and his relationship with Slim, and he just passed on that too. So I can't really tell you what he's up to, but. He still lives in Minneapolis, and I used to pop by his house when I went there, just knock on the door and say hi, and sometimes, I'd hang out for a little bit. Sometimes it would just be hello, goodbye kind of situation, but the last few times I've been there, I just don't stop to talk to him. And again, I'm just trying to give him his space.
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, moving on to the next member of the Replacements that is still with us. Original members, I should say. Even Slim Dunlap. He passed recently too, right?
He passed a year ago today, the 18th.
And that was a big project that you were involved with after he had a stroke in 2012.
Yeah. Well, a friend of the Dunlaps actually sent me a note a couple days after he passed away, or after he had the stroke, rather, and said, "So, are you thinking about a way to help Slim Dunlap make some money to cover hospital expenses, some kind of a Slim Dunlap tribute record?" And I thought, I hadn't thought about that, but now that you put that bug in my mind, I'm gonna chase it. And with the family's blessing, we put together a project called Songs for Slim, and I turned over every rock I could to get artists to come to record Slim's songs that would make him a little publishing money. And so we ended up with an incredible array of people stepping up to help their sick friend, everybody from Jeff Tweedy to Jacob Dylan to Steve Earle, Lucinda Williams, Frank Black from the Pixies. It was Craig Finn from the Hold Steady. I mean, it was an amazing project, and a year of my life helping to put that together and producing the project. And the interesting thing about it was, originally we had thought we'd do a series of 45s with a different band on each side. And when the Replacements went in to record their one Slim cover, they were doing a song of his from his first album called Busted Up. The song was called Busted Up. They let the tape roll afterwards and recorded 4 more tracks, just covers of other people's songs. An old Hank Williams thing called Lost Highway. They did Everything's Coming Up Roses from Hello Dolly. They did a song written by Gordon Lightfoot. Anyway, since they recorded the extra songs, I said, "Well, do you want to do more than just one song on a B-side, on one side of a single?" And Tommy actually said to me, "If you think they're good enough, let's talk about it." So we ended up putting together an EP with those songs that they recorded and a Chris Mars song where he played all the instruments on another Slim Dunlap song called Radio Hook Word Hit. And we made this 10-inch EP, and we thought, rather than put it on sale in record stores, let's auction this off. And we made it a limited edition of, I believe we made 250 copies, and we auctioned them on eBay, and we made $106,000.
Nice.
For Slim's medical bills to start. And then we ended up doing the series of 45s after that brought in some more money, and then a CD compilation of everything that continues to bring in royalties that go to the Slim Dunlap Fund. So that was a great a lot of work, but I
remember that time, and it was just sad that he had suffered the stroke, but bringing together so many great musicians. And then I think shortly after that, it's when the Replacements had a reunion. Well, so I don't know if that kind of stimulated that whole process.
It did. I think it was the catalyst. They had tried to record with the new reunited Replacements band, and sparks just didn't fly. They did some recording in Boston that just didn't fire them up. But when they went in to record a song for Slim's benefit, they were full of the old piss and vinegar. And actually the Gordon Lightfoot song they recorded for that EP, a song called I'm Not Saying, which Paul Westerberg loved because he had heard a version of it by Nico, a girl who sang for the Velvet Underground in the early days. And she did a version on a single in 1967 of this Gordon Lightfoot song, and it's just fantastic and very Westerbergian lyrics. I'm not saying that I love you, I'm not saying that I care. And I think it's actually, if I was making a replacement's best of, I would put I'm Not Saying on it. I think it's one of his best latter-day vocals.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, so we'll have to check that out.
Please
for
do.
all you listeners and viewers. Is that still available, Songs for Slim?
It is. Yep. There's, in fact, the Replacements EP is still available too. We had done the 10-inch for auction, but we did a commercial version as a 12-inch, and that's still in print and still available through. I did that one with New West as well. So, in fact, they just, I know they just got it back in stock recently, and maybe a little bit of a resurge of interest because of the Let It Be set coming out.
Okay, I did want to ask a little bit about Chris Mars, and what's your relationship with him, and what's he doing these days?
Chris Mars lives in a little town south of Minneapolis. He just moved out of Minneapolis 2 years ago, I think. Just decided to try a small town living, and he's a painter. You've probably seen some of his paintings, very inspired by like H.R. Geiger, the guy who designed Alien. They're sort of, I guess you would call them grotesque figures, but he does that and a lot of animation work. But his paintings are quite popular, and I think the last art show I went to of Chris's, everything on display was sold, and they all had price tags on them ranging from $8,000 to $40,000, and so he's done quite well for himself. I'm still in touch with him on a regular basis. In fact, he's been very chatty lately on email, and he's also a Beatle fan. So he was sending me some notes about, do you remember this Beatle video of them doing "Hey Jude" on the David Frost show or whatever? That was kind of cool because I hadn't seen that for a while. But he also just recently, as this Let It Be set was coming out, said, I've stayed quiet, not talking to the press for, the series of releases, reissues, but I can feel the love that you all put into the making of them and the hard work that you put into them, and I want to support. So he's actually doing interviews for this box set now. And as I said, I'm doing a compilation of Slim Dunlap material that contains 22 unreleased tracks on it. It's 44 songs total, both of his albums in their entirety, and a couple of songs that he did for compilation records in Minneapolis, and then a bunch of outtakes from recording sessions. So 44 songs. Anyway, one of the British magazines, probably Mojo and Uncut, great music publications, best music writing in the world, I think, those two magazines, monthlies. Uncut got interested in this Slim project, and they're doing a feature on it, and Chris said he would talk to them for the story. So both he and Tommy talked to them about Slim for this publication that's for this record that's coming out on February 13th. It's called Every Little Word, and it's a comprehensive collection of just about everything that Slim did that he got decent recordings of anyway. He wrote lots of songs that never saw the light of day, but of the stuff that was semi-finished, that we felt worthy of release. It's a really, I got to say, it turned out way better than I anticipated. I'm very, very excited about it and very, very proud of it.
Well, something else to look forward to.
Yeah.
And finally, the last member of the group, the youngest member, is Tommy Stinson, who's still very much active. So just tell us a little bit about your relationship with Tommy right now.
Tommy and I, for the couple years after I quit working with the band in '86, we weren't really in touch. But otherwise, from the get-go, when I met him in 1980, Tommy and I were really tight. Spent a lot of time hanging around my apartment, around the record store. He was a sponge, wanted to just, play me records and wanted me to play him records. So he's like a little brother, in a way. As I mentioned in one of our conversations recently, I was actually his legal guardian when he was too young to get into the club. So I'm very close with, he and his family. His mom and I are best friends. Anyway, he's also, I'm sure you wouldn't mind me saying, he'll be 4 years sober in March. And he is, I would say, unquestionably the best version of Tommy I've ever known.
Nice.
He's really got his shit together, and he's working hard, and he's making a new record right now. I'll tell you, I've been involved in all the records that he's made post-replacements to one degree or another. Sometimes heavily involved, sometimes peripherally involved. But anyway, he always sends me the demos before he makes a record. And when he sent me the demos for this one last spring, there were 14 songs. And I said to him, this is the best batch of material you've ever given me leading up to a new album. It's fantastic. And I think for a while he was kind of splitting things up, putting songs in a Tommy Stinson solo album pile. These songs go into a Cowboys in the Campfire pile. These songs go into a Bash and Pop file. And on this one, he's just picking the best songs of whatever pile that he's come up with. And I think that's a good move for him. I think he's in the process of making maybe the best record he's ever made.
Wow. So 2026 seems like it's going to be a banner year for new replacements-oriented releases.
Well, there's a Slim record and a Tommy record, and Chris just put one out a couple of years ago, so I don't think he'll have anything new this year. But and Paul, as far as we know, isn't working on anything. So yeah, you're probably right. Just those two.
Well, Peter, it really has been a tremendous honor. I hate to let you go. It's been, in my wildest imagination, when I approached you at the store at the Licorice Pizza, I would never have thought we'd have the chance to talk for 5 hours in person. All I wanted to do was shake your hand and say thank you for being such a significant person who affected my life by your experiences with the replacements. But we do have something for you. So by the way,
that means the world to me, by the way. Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to be here, and I was so flattered you asked, and I'm humbled by your kind words.
Well, like I said, the pleasure is certainly the greatest honor to me. You were kind enough to give me this incredible memento of one of the very first 45 that was released.
Yep, the very first Replacements record, a 7-inch 45 of I'm in Trouble and If Only You Were Lonely.
And I'll treasure this always. But we also had a couple things we wanted to give to you. So there is just some mementos of Pasadena City College. So
all right.
A nice little notebook. You can take notes, or you can give it to your son.
Fantastic.
This is a nice sweatshirt from
right.
our bookstore. And then we also have a coffee mug and a Lancer Radio Network pen. You can have 1,000 of these if you choose at Pasadena City College. So just a little thank you for, being so super gracious with your time. Super gracious. And I just want to remind people that Euphoric Recall is available, and it's Peter's autobiography. And
it's really a memoir.
A memoir.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I've been calling it an autobiography.
That's okay.
And just... So we wanted to, I think we're going to play a little of Jen's choice or my choice. So let's see what happens. We have one last song. I'm not sure. We had two different choices. Which one will she play to close us out? Maybe the upbeat one. All right. So this is a college radio station, right?
Right.
So there was a song by the Replacements that really solidified the legend of college radio, and it goes like this. She's not queuing it up as expected. Anyway, there it is.
Ah.
All right. So, final words. Just a big thank you to all the folks here at PCC, especially our producer, Jens Campbell. Our crew, who came in yesterday and 2 days ago, included Kenneth Thomas, Robert Medina, Ashley Ng, Jacob Lochner, and Michael Arn. And our producer, who was here for this whole process. In fact, she's the one who probably gave me the inkling to ask you to come here.
Aw.
It was before I went to that show. I said, I'm going to go see this guy. He's really important in my life. And somehow I think she said, you should have him come down here and do an interview. I said, oh, nah, I won't do that. But I did. And I'm so glad that I did.
So am I.
So Mr. Peter Jesperson, thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you very much.